Paul Dukas, a French composer. He was an important composer of an era that it was beginning in France to relate the music to other art forms. So Dukas was getting from the literature, more than from the painting, the idea of creating an impression that would be a little realistic, but gives the impression. So he creates something that is called the apprentice sorcier, the sorcerer apprentice. So it's about a character that is left in the sorcerer's shop to clean up the shop, and he picks up the book of tricks or spells to create something. So he begins to play with the words and start making magic. So Paul Dukas captures that little story and puts it into music. And you will hear it in the very beginning how the music starts being like just little sparkling things, just like someone would touching with a little button, with a little star on the top of whatever, and ding, ding, bang. So he begins to create the magic. So Paul Dukas captures very well. He does an extremely great job musically with the orchestra, with so many colors and participations of the bassoons doing the movement, and it's funny. And then the percussions creating different sounds, and the whole orchestra then joins together with a big bang, and then it fades away until the magic is gone, and you will hear ta-ta-ta-tan, which means that's all, folks. A symphonic poem is narrating something with music instead of words. So it follows like it say, once upon a time, blah, 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 and then as I said before, ta-ta-ta-tan, this is the end. But in the middle, you will see characters. You will see the main people doing whatever they wanted to do. So in many ways, in other tone poems, it's just about sensations, about feelings. Sometimes it's about people, sometimes it's about places. So the poem means that it enhances just everything with music instead of words. One of the most fantastic orchestrators of all times. And Ravel was an expert. He was really an amazing orchestrator, mixing up sounds, the strings with the winds, then colors, and that we create an impression. He was considered that way because the colors of his music was related the same way that Debussy's music was, the same way probably that Dukas was accomplishing. So Ravel, being a great orchestrator, also was a person that could create sound and make everything sound like it was a huge orchestra. And sometimes they have just a small orchestration, a small group. And sometimes, like we're gonna see now, if we're gonna have a concerto, it's written only for the left hand. Yes, the pianist is not gonna use the two hands. It's gonna be only using the left hand. And that's the story behind that before I go into describing the piece. A pianist in World War I lost his right arm. And apparently he was a very well-known pianist, or at least to these composers. And some of the composers wrote pieces for him to continue performing. So they wrote only for the left hand. And now it's being played by a lot of pianists, even though they have both hands, because it's a challenge to be able to just play with the one hand. But to the listener, you can never tell. Nutcracker, Swan Lake, and Sleeping Beauty. And a lot of people didn't want to recognize him as a great symphonic composer because his ballets were so super famous that they didn't take him seriously. So working his symphonies, and they were good symphonies, but never captured the idea that to the critics that he was certainly a great symphonic composer, because the symphony work captures different tools. He has to have a different type of technique of writing a symphony. It normally has 4 movements, and the first one is with introduction or fast, and then the second is melodic and andante, the third one is kind of a scherzo, and it moves fast, and then the last one is even faster and louder. How can someone write in a Fifth Symphony like it would be also clever, and it would be a turning point to a lot of people that would listen to his music? So he really began with a motive of a melody taken with the clarinets, then presents and immediately captures the whole atmosphere and idea. Da da ding da da dam ba ding ba ba bam ba ba bing bam, and it's almost alone with the clarinets, accompanied by very dark orchestration, until it develops into big sonoric theme. And then in the second movement, he brings out a gorgeous melody, and it's played by a single instrument, which is the French horn. So no composers before that were composing for a wind instrument to have such big solos, especially in the brass. Normally they would have a little part, or they were doubling the bassoons or the cello if they were French horns, and there were trumpets that were doubling the oboes and the clarinets and the violins, or the clarinets doubling the high violins and the flutes too. And so it would be always like a mixture. But suddenly he has a big solo for a single instrument in the brass, never heard of in such a manner. The last movement is a recopilation a little bit of the theme of the beginning that is presented again, but it gets in a bigger and a more grandeur way, and it really sounds like it's going to be an end, a real bang to an end. And that's why I consider this a very important composition in classical music, and that's what it is in our selections of turning points in music. And the Paul Dukas piece, the Social Apprentice, it was a great way of changing things in your mind as a performer. Being in an orchestra, you have to play in the violin section with another 14 or 15 players. Sometimes some in front of you, some behind you. Because sometimes I was playing in the first violin section in the third stand, for example, with my brother. And we had to be playing the pieces. So when you had to start counting in 1, and every bar has a 1, so it's like a pum pa pum pa 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 pum pa pum pa 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 pum. So you had to be counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10, 11 and 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, because that's when they ended the phrase in the bassoons. But you only have counting. So you are not a violinist like it's always playing the melody. At this time you're just counting. So it's like being almost a percussionist. So your mind begins to work in a different way. And if you have the whole section connected that way, then you know when you come, you have to be very precise. The Ravel piece, the left-hand concerto, I was playing in this orchestra, and I was so amazed to see for the first time live, to hear how a composer could write for a contrabassoon. How a contrabassoon that we normally just hear, just something like that, you know? And I said, how can someone write for an instrument that sounds just like rattling, just like pushing a furniture in your house? how can that be possible? So suddenly when I hear this very good instrumentalist, I hear, it was amazing to hear that you can hear music made out of that instrument. Because even in the Beethoven's Fifth, we will hear that as a bassoon, a contrabassoon as well. But here to have it as a melody, a single instrument, wow! But to hear the contrabassoon as a melodic instrument, wow, I'm still amazed and astonished. That's probably one of my favorite moments in the whole concerto. In Tchaikovsky's piece, well, I love the French horn. So even though the beginning was just with the clarinets and it was obscure and melodic, I found that when we were playing in the orchestra that I couldn't wait until the second movement would come. Even though I was playing violin, not the French horn in those days. But when we started with the soft chords, just to prepare, and then suddenly comes, oh my God, that is the voice of God. To be able to hear that portrayal, that instrument that comes in such way out of your body, and it goes into the sound of your body, comes into that mouthpiece, and it goes throughout those 20-something meters of tubes, and then it goes and it comes out and surrounds the whole place and permeates the whole. Amazing. Please join us to our concerts. Let me tell you something. We're talking about music, and we're talking about a season, and it's wonderful. But let me tell you what is the real turning point in music. You coming to our concerts. Enjoy them.